When you think of royalty, what comes to your mind? Probably your favorite Disney movies with princesses being rescued by princes, going to balls and dancing. But the thing that usually doesn't come to mind are the true royal heroes of our tradition, women like Mary and Esther. Today's prayer service is about considering what it truly means to be a royal.
The king of Persia was a famous warrior who was known to hold grand parties and walk in his beautiful gardens. One day he decided he must have a wife. He sent for all the women in the kingdom and chose the most beautiful to be his bride. Her name was Esther. Esther was raised by her cousin, Mordecai, who loved her like a daughter. Though he was a faithful subject, he was worried when Esther was chosen for royalty. "Promise me you will not tell anyone you are a Jew," he said. "Many people at the palace hate the Jews because we were once their enemies." "I promise," said Esther, and she went to prepare for her wedding. When the king saw Esther dressed as a beautiful queen, he adorned her with a golden crown. He declared a holiday and had gold coins distributed to the poor in the city. There was a great wedding feast that lasted all night. That night, Mordecai overheard two royal servants plotting to kill the king. He sent word to the king, saving his life. The king wrote his name in the book of records, but soon forgot all about it. Now the king had a powerful advisor, his grand vizier, Haman. He was a vain and jealous man who demanded everyone bow to him, but Mordecai never did. "Why don't you bow to me?" Haman asked him. "I'm a Jew," he said, "and Jews bow only to God." Haman's anger boiled. He plotted not only to get rid of Mordecai, but of all the Jews in Persia. He drew lots with his friends to find the best day for killing the Jews. Then he went to the king and said, "Your Majesty, the Jews do not obey your commands. Why don't you get rid of them?" The king gave his royal ring of command to Haman and said, "Do what you like with them." Mordecai learned of the plot and sent news to Esther. He wrote, "Only you can save us now. Go before the king and beg him to be merciful." Esther fell to the floor. She knew that by going before the king, she could be walking to her own death. No one could appear before him uninvited, not even herself. Furthermore, the queen would not be safe if it was his will that all the Jews die. Through her tears, she read Mordecai's closing words. "Who knows? Perhaps it was for a time like this that you became a royal." She knew then what she must do. Esther sent back to Mordecai the response, "Go and assemble all the Jews who are in Susa. Fast and pray on my behalf, all of you, not eating or drinking for night or day for 3 days. I and my maids will also fast in the same way. Thus prepared, I will go before the king contrary to the law. If I perish, I perish." Esther and Mordecai fasted and prayed for 3 days and nights. "O God, whose power is over all, hear the voice of those in despair. Save us from the power of the wicked and deliver me from my fear." Once the time for prayer was done, Esther clothed herself in her most beautiful robes and, trembling, went before the king. As she entered the throne room, Esther shook with fear, holding her head down. When Esther raised her eyes to the king, she saw his face glowing with anger. "Who dares approach me uninvited?" When she saw his eyes, glowing with anger, sitting on his throne with flowing robes and jewels, she fainted. At seeing his wife drop, the king's anger turned to mercy. He ran to his beloved queen and implored her. "What will cause you to appear before me thus, risking your life?" "Oh, my king," she said, "I have only one favor to ask you. Hold a banquet tomorrow and have Haman come with you." The king agreed. Haman was delighted to hear he was invited to dine with the king. The only thing that spoiled his mood was that insolent Mordecai, who refused to bow down to him. "Have a pike erected," his wife told him, "and have the king impale him on it. Then you can dine in peace." Haman had the pike erected that day. That night the king could not sleep. He had the book of records read to him. When he heard of how Mordecai had saved his life, he asked, "What was his reward?" "None is recorded, your majesty," was the answer. Early the next day, Haman came to the king, hoping to ask for Mordecai's execution. "Oh, Haman," cried the king, "tell me, how can I reward a man who has served me well?" Thinking he was talking about himself, Haman answered, "Dress him in royal robes, put him on one of the king's finest horses, and lead him through the city among cheering crowds. Very good, said the king. Find Mordecai and see that it's done. Haman obeyed the king, but boiled inside with rage. That night at the banquet, the king said, Esther, my queen, how can I please you? I love you so. I'll give you half my kingdom. What do you desire? Esther took a deep breath. No, your majesty, she said. That is not what I desire. Go on, he said. What is it? I desire something more precious, she said. I want the lives of my people. I am a Jew, and we're all going to be killed. By whose order? Demanded the king. The man sitting beside you, she said. Haman. The king was horrified. Take him away, he shouted. Execute him. Haman was executed on the same pike that he built for Mordecai. The king sent for Mordecai and made him his new grand vizier, giving him the ring of authority. The first thing Mordecai did was tear up the order to execute the Jews. To this day, Jews celebrate Esther's victory on the Feast of Purim with singing and dancing.
Esther is a royal not because she married a king. It isn't because she had jewels or a crown. What made Esther a royal was that she knew that God was her king, and she was willing to sacrifice her own life to save her people. That's what being a royal is truly about.